This is Tornado Alley, the central part of the United States that's culturally and historically known for tornadoes. Since 1950, these states have had hundreds of tornadoes. And movies like Twister and The Wizard of Oz reinforce this cultural stereotype. Tornadoes happen in the Great Plains. If we zoom out and look at all tornadoes since 1950, when official tracking of tornadoes began, a different map emerges. The Tornado Alley we know today is hardly the whole story. See, if we split tornadoes recorded between 1950 and 1990, and 1990 to the present, and specifically look at the month of April, typically the most active tornado month of the year, we see a clear shift. A shift eastward known as Dixie Alley, an area that's wholly unfit for tornadoes. Tornadoes typically form when dry air comes in from the Pacific Ocean and moist air comes up from the Gulf of Mexico. When these two air masses meet, they create an unstable atmosphere. Between the moist and dry air, we get significant wind shear, the change in wind direction over a short distance, and increases in CAPE, the amount of energy available for thunderstorms. Shear and CAPE are the key ingredients for thunderstorms, and more importantly, tornadoes. And with these two ingredients, the United States has over 1,200 tornadoes a year. To put that in perspective, the country that experiences the second most number of tornadoes is Canada with 200. So why is this shift to the east happening? Well, there are three main theories. And the first theory starts with what's known as the dry line. The dry line refers to the place where the dry air from the Rockies and the moist air from the Gulf of Mexico meet. And the dry line is also known for separating the rainier eastern side of the United States and the drier western United States. And what's important to note about the dry line is that most tornado and thunderstorm outbreaks happen in front of or to the east of the dry line. And the dry line operates on a daily cycle. And during the day, the atmosphere heats up, pushing the dry line further east. And at night, the atmosphere cools, pulling the dry line back west. And this daily dry line movement is actually what causes tornadoes to pop up usually at sunset or after dark for this southeastern part of the United States. Theory number one is that the drought conditions out west are actually causing the middle point of the dry line to move slightly east, pushing this dry line to have that middle point further east. So when the daily heating and cooling are happening, the dry line is simply moving further east because its midpoint has shifted. And since the 1800s, it's been reported that the dry line has moved about 140 miles east. But that's not the whole story. Our second theory centers around the warming waters in the Gulf of Mexico. As the Gulf continues to warm, more moisture is released into the air. And remember, this warm, moist air is one of the key ingredients to an unstable atmosphere, leading to thunderstorms, supercell thunderstorms, and more importantly, tornadoes. And this was a key finding in a paper published in 2016 by Jung and Kurtman. Jung and Kurtman concluded that the temperature of the Gulf of Mexico was a good indicator for how severe the upcoming tornado season was going to be. Their conclusion was that warmer waters in the Gulf implied more moisture and therefore more CAPE or instability in the atmosphere. And that brings us to theory number three. Are we just getting better at tracking tornadoes? And are simply observing a pattern that's already existed? In the United States, we have some of the most comprehensive weather radar coverage in the world. We've gone through two generations of radar, WR88 and Dupole radar, with a new generation of weather radar expected to come in the next 10 years. So our ability to spot and detect radars has gotten significantly better since the official historical record began in 1950. In a 2017 report to Congress published by the Department of Commerce and NOAA, found that because of our comprehensive radar coverage, warning times have increased from just 4 minutes in the 1980s to on average of 11 minutes over the past decade, clearly showing that we are getting better at observing potential tornadoes touching down. And on top of all that, storm chasing has simply become much more popular, turning from a professional job to a hobbyist experience, even with references to the surge of popularity in the recent movie Twisters 2. Streams like Ryan Hall Y'all and Max Velocity bringing in millions of viewers on moderate and high-risk days. So are we just seeing and tracking more tornadoes because more people are paying attention? Now, realistically, this shift east is due to all three of these theories. And more importantly, papers have actually confirmed this trend. We're seeing more tornadoes in the southeast and fewer tornadoes in the Great Plains. And what's even more interesting is that tornado season is actually getting longer and is up about 30 days in the past 30 years. But even with a longer tornado season, that doesn't actually mean we're seeing more tornadoes. Actually, what's happening is that there are more tornadoes on large tornado outbreak days. So there are more tornadoes concentrated to those days that have the atmospheric conditions just right for tornadoes. So we're getting few individual days of tornado outbreaks, but when those outbreaks happen, they're becoming more severe. All right, so why is this a problem for specifically the southeast? And this discussion starts in a very obvious place. Trees. This is a map of tree coverage in the United States. As you can see here in Tornado Alley, very little tree coverage, on average 10 to 15% covering the central part of the country. But if we pay attention here to the southeastern United States, there's on average of over 50% tree coverage, with the tree cover in the state of Alabama being over 71%. And in severe weather, trees become projectiles. And an area with heavy tree cover like the southeast United States, damage costs and risks to life are going to be higher. And the second key issue to tornadoes in the southeast, the timing of the dry line. Every day, the dry line moves eastward naturally and then back westward during the day. But simply because of where these states are in relation to the dry line, southeastern states have a high tendency for thunderstorms to form and not explode until after sunset, meaning that night tornadoes are unfortunately very common. And this is a huge communication problem for the local weather service, local radio and TV stations. One, people are simply asleep. And two, most people won't be able to see the threat as it's coming. And finally, the southeastern United States is simply much more densely populated than the Great Plains states. And most of those homes don't have basements. Unlike in traditional Tornado Alley, many homes have been dealing with tornadoes for years. There's this cultural understanding that tornadoes do happen here, so we need basements and safe spaces in order to prepare for those. Meanwhile, down here in the southeastern United States, basements are quite uncommon. And unfortunately, all of these factors together lead to a higher risk for loss of life and damages. Now, all of this can sound terrifying, especially if you live in the southeastern United States. Although tornadoes can happen anywhere in the United States, the ultimate probability of being hit by one is actually quite low. And you can take steps to prepare for that worst case scenario now, including clearing out your yard of dead branches and trees, having emergency supplies on hand, and above all, heeding the warnings of your local weather forecasting offices. Thanks so much for watching, and let me know if there's any other weather topics you want me to cover in the comments below. Bye!